The scene starts in a bedroom where a boy named Chu Qing lying on a bed and Ye Chenxi was sitting upon him. Chu Qing opens his eyes and the Chenxi was happy to see him awake, but Chu Qing is shocked to see the girl with him. He jumps out of bed and starts asking where he is. Ye Chenxi remarks that she didn't expect the drug to work for such a short period of time. Still, she finds it more interesting to have a living man with her. Confused by her words, Chu Qing screamed and suddenly realizes that he has been reborn. 300 years ago, he had accidentally entered into the fairy world at Qingcheng Mountain, and he began his cultivation journey. In those 300 years, he had worked tirelessly day and night to increase his power and become a swordsman cultivator. He was about to reach Realm of Eternity, but didn't reach that, instead opened a hall of time and space, but he never imagined he would return to the time when he was just 17 years old. Still perplexed by the woman's presence, asks to her what she wants, but she was behaving so seductive. Chu Qing mentions that there must be some misunderstanding and now he needs to leave. Chengxi stands up and says that she never let go of her pigeons and it is his honor for him to be liked by her. Shushan ignores her and starts to walk out of the room. Suddenly, Chenxi grabs his hand with strong grip. He turned back and held her hand. He realized that his current body doesn't have much energy and was trying to push her, but she charged on him. Some laser lights came out and he fell down backward. Chu Qing saw his school uniforms, took it and ran to leave the house. Ye Chenxi called him as her big white rabbit whom she will never let go. As he steps outside, he takes in the sight of the city, which he hasn't seen in 300 years. He feels happy that he finally returned to the earth and he can finally reunite with his parents. However, he notices something strange around him. Women were dominating over the men, and men were behaving so feminine. Chu was shocked to see this, and he realized that in this world, women are in charge of every activity, holding the roles and responsibilities that men would typically have in a normal world. The scene then shifted to the library, where Chu Qing went to find out why things had turned out this way. He discovered that in ancient times, a cataclysm occurred between the seasons of spring and autumn. This event altered women's physiology, making them smarter and stronger. A woman named Kong Mo was born, and she developed the ideology that women are superior to men. This caused the shift in imperial power from prince to princesses. In this world, when there's an extramarital affair, the man is considered unfaithful and is heavily frowned upon. However, it's normal for women to chase after men. He didn't even know if his family was like this too. When he went home, he saw his father, Lin Yuantu, taking care of the house. His father was surprised to see him since he had told him that he was going to visit a friend and would be returning late. His father noticed the scent of women's perfume on him and asked if he had been with a woman. His father had already told him that it's dangerous for a handsome boy like him to go outside. He showed him a news report about a 15-year-old boy who believed his classmate was raped, and the video was spread, ruining the boy's future. Chushin reassured his father that he didn't need to worry about him, and asked where his mother was. His father told him that his mother was out at a business meeting and that their business wasn't going well these days. Chu then went to call his sister to eat something together. He was shocked to find her watching porn in her room. Embarrassed, he quickly closed the door and flustered, shouted through the door for her to come out for the meal. She was blushing as she came out. Chu Qing asked her if she had been watching porn in her room. She replied that this is the age of live broadcasts and that it was fun watching a little guy with a hot body, then walked away. After a while, she dressed up to hang out with her friends and asked her father for 100 yuan. Her father asked why she needed to go out with them. She replied that she wanted to socialize and do business with them. Her father told her to learn something from her brother so that he and her mother wouldn't have to worry about her. She said she didn't need to learn anything from her brother, as he could easily marry a rich woman, but she has to struggle for herself. She insisted that her parents must support her and then went out. Chu Qing asked his father if it was okay to let her go out like this. His father replied that there wasn't much else he could do, as he couldn't tie her down. She has to go out and earn money. Chu Qing was surprised by this feminist world. His mother came home from work, and Chu went to her and hugged her. She asked what was wrong with him and gave him some pocket money. Chu Qing thought that in his previous life, his mother had been miserly, and he would have to beg her for money just to go out. But now she gave him money voluntarily. He wanted to return the money, but his mother refused to take it back. His father then told her about his sister, saying that she was fooling them, but his mother was okay with it, explaining that this was how she had hooked up with him for the first place. Chu was irritated to see his parents behaving this way. He worried about whether he would end up the same in the future. He left his parents and entered his room, which was spotlessly clean. He realized that in this world, women are dominant, so every household wants to have a daughter. A woman must have a house and a car to marry a good man, while a man only needs to be handsome and attractive. He opened his drawer and saw that it was full of letters. Then he realized that he had been the school princess in middle school. He sat down and thought it would be better for him to keep cultivating and leave this world as soon as possible. He also considered the chi of this world, which was so thick that, with its help, he could open the tunnel and return to his original world. He started practicing his cultivation techniques. After practicing the Goken freedom skill, his senses and feelings became more sensitive. Many thoughts were swirling in his mind. His desire to leave this place, his sister still not being home, and more. Suddenly Chu's phone rang. It was his sister calling. She sounded distressed and told him she was in trouble. She urgently asked him to bring a black bag that was hidden under her bed, instructing him not to tell their parents or the police. Some women were holding her captive and told him to bring the bag immediately if he didn't want her to get hurt. They directed him to Crescendo Bar on High Street, room number 302. After cutting the call, Chu hurried to her room, found the black bag under the bed, and quickly grabbed it. He knew he couldn't let anyone mess with his family. Instead of taking the road, Chu used his skills to jump from building to building, reaching the bar as quickly as possible. When he arrived at room 302, he found his sister crying and in a dangerous situation with those women. He threw the bag onto the table in front of the leader and demanded to release his sister. The woman, however, seemed more interested in Chu and asked him his age. He dismissed the question, saying it didn't matter. The woman then opened the bag, revealing it was filled with a huge amount of money. Chu's sister was shocked. She had no idea the money was there. Chu was also surprised as it amounted to about $1 million. His sister insisted she didn't know about the money, explaining that Xiaolin had just asked her to hold on to the bag for a while. The woman told them that Lin had caused trouble at her place and stolen the money, and with that, she released Chu's sister. However, she wasn't willing to let Chu leave. As his sister prepared to go, she muttered that she knew it couldn't be that easy. The woman then remarked that she found Chu young and cute and didn't want him to leave, though she agrees to let his sister go. His sister tried to protect him, pleading with the woman not to involve her brother and to let him go. The lady laughed, saying that if she wanted Chu to leave, then she would have to stay and work for them. Reluctantly, his sister agreed to stay and told Chu to go home. She promised she would catch up with him later after resolving the situation. Chu Qing, offended by the suggestion, replied that he had morals and asked the woman if she really wanted him to stay. He placed his foot on the table and taunted her. The lady warned him not to be smart, threatening to take him to her bed and torture him in every possible way. In response, Chu Qing moved forward and slapped the lady so hard that blood flew from her mouth. His sister was terrified as a fight broke out. Chu Qing realized how strong she was and found it intriguing that women in this world possessed such strength. The lady ordered her guards to subdue him. Using his skills, Chu Qing jumped away and taunted them to attack if they could. He defeated the guards and started to walk out, but the lady pulled out a gun, threatening to shoot if they didn't stop. His sister, scared, begged her to spare her brother. The lady, unmoved, declared that no amount of begging would save them. She was determined to kill both. Just then, the door opened, and Ye Chenxi walked in with a cigarette in her mouth. She observed the scene with interest and asked why she hadn't been invited to it. She was happy to see Chu again. Chu recognized her as the woman he had met in the bedroom on the day he was reborn. He asked her why she was there. She replied that this place belonged to her and told the others to leave, declaring that he was now her responsibility and that she would take care of him. Zhou Yun protested, saying that this was against the rules. In response, Chenxi ordered her guards to take Zhou Yun away, cut off her hands and feet, and throw her into the street. Ye Chenxi then turned to Chu, admiring him, and said that this was her gift to him. Chu was surprised by her sudden kindness. Chenxi explained that he was the first man who had dared to speak to her that way, making him different from all the others. She then expressed her desire for him to become her 36th boyfriend. However, Chu refused, saying he wasn't interested in her and that he could handle himself. Chenxi remarked that a simple man like him, with his small frame, could easily end up as Zhou's prostitute. Chu challenged her by asking if she was comparing his strength to her own. He then proposed a game. If he won, she would have to stop bothering him. His sister, worried about him, tried to dissuade him from going through with it. But Chenxi, confident in her abilities, reassured him and accepted the challenge, betting that if she won, Chu would have to be her boyfriend. The game soon began, and the bar quickly filled with onlookers. They whispered among themselves, doubting the sense of a man challenging a woman, claiming that men were made of water, while women were made of iron. Chu realized that in this world, women were indeed very strong and saw men as insignificant. Chenxi intended to show him the vast difference in strength between men and women. Despite finding Chenxi extraordinarily strong, Chu was determined to prove that he wasn't just an ordinary man. Using his powers, he managed to defeat her and win the game. Chu won the game and reminded Chenxi not to forget about the bet. He then grabbed his sister's hand and left the place. Everyone was in disbelief, shocked to see how a man could be strong enough to defeat a woman. Chenxi felt both intimidated and intrigued. Her guard suggested chasing after him, but she slapped one of them and said she hadn't lost him yet. She told Chu that it was surprising, but men like him were meant to take care of women's needs. She reiterated her offer. All he had to do was say yes and become her husband, and no other woman would dare lay a hand on him. Chu turned down the offer, asking who had told her that men needed to be glued to women. He pointed out that men have hands and feet too. They can make their own path. The crowd was stunned by his refusal. Chengxi tried to explain that since ancient times men have been pursued by women and that women are the pillars of the world. She claimed that the world's virtues and masterpieces were all created by women, and even children knew this. Another woman chimed in, saying that while there were a few male heroes in literature, it was women who truly mattered in society. Chu stepped closer to her and said that all he knew was that men strive and fight to improve themselves, and what they do rewards the efforts of the cute ladies. With that, he walked out of the bar. Chengxi found him even more interesting and declared that he was her type, insisting that she wasn't going to let him go. Her guard suggested returning home, but she refused, saying she wanted to stay outside for 2 more days. Chu returned home with his sister, who asked him not to tell their parents about what had happened. But Chu insisted that he would tell them because they were worried about her. His sister shouted at him, feeling threatened by his intentions. She was still amazed by his strength and asked why he didn't want to marry Chengxi in the future, pointing out that Chengxi was the heiress of a very important family in Jinmen, and if he married her, they would both benefit. Chu angrily told her to shut up or he'd send her back to the bar. Once they reached home, Chu continued practicing to regain his true strength, feeling that his current power was insufficient. He then heard his sister's voice watching porn again and thought to himself that she was even worse than his sister from the original world. The next day, Chu went to school and met his best friend, Lin Dong. Lin, holding Chu's hand, asked him what he had been doing the day before and why he hadn't answered his calls. Chu, however, felt irritated by Lin's overly feminine behavior. Lin then mentioned that he had heard Chu was in trouble the previous day. Chu brushed it off, saying it was nothing and that he was fine now. He quickly made an excuse to get away from Lin, thinking that this boy wasn't acting like his friend anymore. Chu went to the classroom, where everyone was busy with their own activities. He sat at his desk, feeling frustrated and wanting to leave this world. Songcha Oran, the class president, poked him and asked if he was okay. Chu made an excuse, saying he was just hungry because he hadn't had breakfast. Oran, visibly nervous, offered to eat with him. Another girl in the classroom, feeling jealous, told Oran to stay away. She pushed Oran aside and asked Chu if he had read her love letter from the previous day. Annoyed, Chu pushed the girl away, which made her angry, and she was about to punch him, almost starting a fight. At that moment, Ye Mao, another student, entered the scene. He told the girl to leave. Ye Mao was Ye Chenxi's brother, and he wanted to talk to Chu for a minute. He led Chu out of the classroom and apologized for what had happened between Chu and his sister the day before. He then asked Chu to go for a ride with him and his sister. Chu, however, responded that she would probably mix drugs in his drink and take him to the bedroom again, as she had done before. Ye Mao was embarrassed to hear all these. Later, when classes ended, Chu was walking down the road when Chenxi stopped her car and asked him to get in, saying it was for the sake of his family. Chu reluctantly entered the car and Chenxi seemed pleased. He warned her that she had made a huge mistake by messing with his family. She assured him that she wasn't threatening him. He demanded that she admit whether she was threatening him or not. Jumping towards her, he warned her that she must understand the consequences of threatening him. Chengxi calmly replied that she wasn't threatening him, but offered to help her sister and mother with their business, which was currently facing some issues. Skeptical, Chu asked why she was being so sympathetic. She responded that whether it was sympathy or not, she intended to pursue him openly, suggesting they start as friends and later take care of his family's business together. Chu finally sat back, agreeing to be friends with her, but told her not to annoy him and to drive faster. Chengxi then asked him if he practiced martial arts. Chu replied that he didn't, adding that in this world, men are capable of cultivation. Chengxi, however, wasn't convinced. She said she suspected he was lying about his strength and wasn't like other men, so she had done a little research on his family and found no connection to old martial arts. She thought he was trying to keep his abilities a secret from her. Chu was baffled by her comments, having no idea what she was talking about. Suddenly, a vehicle collided with them, causing a severe car accident. Chengxi was immediately worried about Chu, asking if he was okay. Although injured, Chu managed to hold on and somehow got out of the car. Chengxi insisted on taking him to the hospital, but before they could move, they noticed a group of feminine silhouettes approaching them, armed with weapons. Chengxi shouted at them, demanding to know how they dared to hurt Chu. Ready to fight, she used her skills to jump up and kick them. Another woman approached Chu, underestimating him once again. He punched her, joined the fight, and used his skills to kick them all out. Chengxi was fighting alongside him. The women were shocked to see his fighting abilities. Together, they defeated their opponents, and Chengxi praised Chu, saying that if he hadn't been there, she would have been in a difficult situation. She then invited him to dinner, but Chu declined, suggesting they reschedule for another day. He needed to leave before his father started worrying about him. Just then, Chenxi's phone rang, and she shouted in distress. Chu wanted to ask what had happened but decided it wasn't his place and began to walk away. Chenxi, with tears in her eyes, grabbed his hand and begged him not to leave. She revealed that her mother had been hurt, just like they had. Chu was surprised to hear this, wondering how it could be a coincidence that both she and her mother were injured at the same time. It seemed that the Jinman underworld was about to be shaken. Chenxi told Chu that if her mother died, her aunt would kick her out of the family. Chu reassured her, telling her not to worry, and agreed to stay by her side. He encouraged her to stay strong, reminding her that her family now depended on her. Chenxi was moved by his words, began to trust him, and hugged him tightly. That night, they went to Chenxi's mansion. Her guards were pleased to see her but informed her that the situation was tense. Her aunt, Ye Mei, had ordered that no one except Chenxi was allowed to enter the mansion. Chu asked what was going on, and Chenxi explained that her mother had told her that Ye Mei had been in the family for years, conspiring with other families. However, without concrete proof, she couldn't take any action. She hadn't expected her aunt to make her move so quickly. Ignoring Mei's orders, Chenxi began walking in with Chu Qing. When others tried to stop her, she shouted, asking how they could mistreat her guest. Chu told them that he was a doctor and had come to check on Miss Ye. He mentioned that he had studied medicine in the fairy world and that his skills could help now. The guards mocked him, questioning how a man could be a doctor. One of them joked that another guard had been suffering from a reproductive system infection for years and also had kidney problems, possibly due to practicing old martial arts for many years. Despite taking Chinese medicines, her condition hadn't improved, and she was relying on numerous pills. The other guard responded that she had no right to criticize someone for taking pills. Finally, they allowed Chu to enter with Chenxi. Inside, her aunt and cousin, Ye Meyer, were waiting to welcome her. Ye Mei remarked that Chenxi had arrived just in time, or who knows what might have happened. Chenxi rudely asked her aunt about her mother. Mi reminded her to respect the family hierarchy and address her properly as aunt. She then focused on Chu, questioning how Chenxi could bring a stranger into their home. It was forbidden for a man to join the Ye family. Chenxi explained that Chu was a doctor and that she needed to see her mother. Ye Mei was shocked to hear that Chu was a doctor, as she had assumed he was someone Chenxi had brought home a few days ago. She also mentioned that if a man wanted to join the Ye family, he would need to prove certain abilities and convert himself into a Ye family man. Otherwise, he couldn't enter the house. She then asked her daughter to check whether Chu was skilled or not. Mei set a trap for Chenxi, knowing that if Meyer harmed Chenxi's guest, Chenxi would protect him, even if it meant breaking their family's rules. If Chenxi did so, no one, not even her mother, could protect her from being cast out of the family. Meyer made a bet with Chu that if she won, he would have to spend the night with her. Chenxi shouted at her for being outrageous, but Chu stopped her and said it was fine. He would fight. Meyer suddenly jumped to attack, and Chu realized that she had only made those comments to distract them. He punched her so hard that she was thrown back. Then he asked if she still wanted to make love with him. Disgusted by the violence against her daughter, Mei called Chu an animal. Chenxi defended him, saying that Meyer had provoked him. Chu then suggested they take Meyer to the hospital, as he wasn't sure if she had sustained internal injuries. An aunt cursed him. They ignored them and went inside the house. Another cousin was standing at the door of her mother's room. She was happy to see Chenxi and hugged her warmly. Chenxi asked about her mother, and she replied that her mother was all right, but the wound was severe and she was under observation. Chu suggested that if that was the case, they shouldn't waste any time and should check on her to see what he could do to help. The girl asked who he was, and Chenxi explained that he was a friend and a doctor who was going to check on her mother. They entered the room, and Chenxi was relieved to see her mother and hugged her. Her mother asked who Chu was. Chu introduced himself as a doctor and explained that Chenxi had called him to take care of her. He then asked her mother to show him her wounds. Suddenly, upon seeing Chenxi's family, Chu realized it was late, and he hadn't gone home yet. He knew his father would scold him for this, and worried about how he would explain the situation to his family. Chenxi's mother laughed and said there wasn't much more he could do, then asked him to leave so she could have some time with her daughter. The girls showed him to the door, and he left the room. Chenxi began convincing her mother to let him examine her wound, praising him as an amazing person who had saved her life. Her mother was surprised to hear this, as it was the first time Chenxi had ever complimented a man. Chu then entered the scene and said he had investigated the attack, discovering that they had targeted her with a harmful energy on the left side of her back. He also suggested that she needed to use a large amount of her energy to prevent this negative energy from spreading throughout her body. Chu explained that she was weakened because she had used much of her energy to counter the intruder's power. Her mother was shocked to hear this and asked everyone to leave, as she wanted to speak with Chu alone. Chenxi didn't want to leave him alone, but since it was her mother's order, she had to leave the room. The doors closed, and her mother asked Chu if the Li family had sent him and what his intentions were with Chenxi. Chu, confused, clarified that he was not from the Li family and told her that if she had any doubts about him being with Chenxi, she should ask her daughter because she was the one interested in him. He also reminded her that he had saved Chenxi's life, and without him, she might not have survived. Her mother believed him and agreed to show him the wound. At the same time, she warned him that if he had any plans against Chenxi, it would be his family who would receive his corpse. As she started removing her clothes, Chu closed his eyes and stopped her, saying that while he might be young, he was still a man. When he opened his eyes, he saw a severely infected wound on her back. He was shocked to see the extent of the wound, which was far worse than he had anticipated. He informed her that while she could resist the infection for now, in a few days, her internal organs would start to deteriorate. Her mother asked him if there was anything he could do about it. He said he would try and, touching her wound, used his power to absorb the negative energy. The process caused her a great deal of pain as Chu concentrated all his strength and power on the task. With his current abilities, he was only able to extract some of the negative energy and told her that he didn't dare extract it all at once. He had done everything he could for the moment. Her mother felt some relief and was feeling better. She then asked him if he wanted anything in return for saving her from danger. He replied that Chenxi was a good friend, and it was simply a normal act of help. She smiled and agreed as she forgot, "You're just a friend of hers." This sounded strange to him. Chenxi was once again impressed by him and thanked him for healing her mother. She grabbed him to hug and asked him not to leave tonight as she had a little reward for him. He pushed her away and refused, saying that if his parents found out he spent the night with a girl, they would freak out, and then he headed to the car. Chenxi understood and said, "After all, they have a good son in you." Chu left, glancing at his hand, where the bad energy had been absorbed. It felt like a curse, one that he couldn't eradicate with his current level of power. In the fairy world, he had an elixir that could handle such things, and he wondered if there might be a counterpart in this world. The next day, as he arrived at school, he heard students cheering for a girl named Tang Xian. Chu was surprised to hear her name. She was playing basketball skillfully, looking pretty while doing so. He could hardly believe it was her, his first love from preparatory school. All the boys were crazy about her, some saying she melted their hearts, while others praised her as a genius. Then Chu realized that this was a different world where they didn't know each other, and if he approached her, he might embarrass himself. Suddenly, he heard her calling out to him, saying she had seen him before. Chu made an excuse, saying that since they attended the same school, she might have seen him around. But she insisted, not in that way. Chu realized that, just like in the other world, she was always curious about him. Ignoring that thought, she asked him to play basketball with her, offering to teach him. Chu simply snatched the ball from her hand, spun it, and agreed to play. Tang then said that if she win, so he have to be my boyfriend. Chu asked her what would happen if he won, and she replied that she will do whatever you want. Everyone started talking about them. Tang drove forward, crossed him, jumped to shoot, and scored her first point. Chu was surprised by her basketball skills, and everyone was convinced she was going to make him her boyfriend. She told him she wouldn't play lightly because she wanted to win the game. He challenged her to play again. This time she dribbled, drove forward, and jumped to shoot, but Chu jumped even higher and blocked her attempt. The audience was shocked to see how high he could leap. Chu then said it was his turn. Tang was determined. This time Chu drove forward, leapt, and made the shot, scoring and winning the match. Tang had lost. She asked him what she needed to do now that he had won. Chu gently pressed her cheek and asked her to go on a date with him. Everyone was happy for them, and she blushed with a smile, saying that if he wanted to date her, he would need to become even stronger. Chu wondered how she had become so proud of herself. He realized that on the day he helped Chenxi's mother, it had led to a 30% increase in his pure aura and spiritual body. Later, Chenxi asked him what he wanted as a reward for saving her mother. Chu had some silly thoughts of playing around and smiled to himself. She asked again what kind of reward he wanted and why he was smiling. He replied that it was nothing and that he needed to think it over first. While returning from school, he was thinking about how, next time, he would completely heal Chenxi's mother. After that, he could fully awaken his spiritual body, as he was progressing rapidly in this world. Suddenly a car passed by and stopped. A man stepped out and approached him. The man asked if he was Chu Qing and if it was true that he was pursuing Tang Xian. The man spat on the ground and introduced himself as Liu Wei, asking Chu if he knew who he was. Chu showed no interest and called him dumb. Frustrated, Liu Wei warned Chu not to ignore him while he was talking. He then launched a sudden attack, but Chu quickly grabbed his hand and twisted it. None of Liu Wei's security guards came to help him. Chu slammed Liu Wei's head on the ground and kicked his guards, telling him to bring more people next time if he wanted to deal with him. Liu Wei warned Chu that the Li family wouldn't let him go unharmed and mentioned that Tang Xian was going to marry him, as it was already a done deal between their families. This enraged Chu, who beat Li Wei severely. Chu then decided he needed to investigate whether this was solely Tang Xian's decision, or if there were internal issues within the Tang family, and how they could accept an arranged marriage with the Li family. He also wondered if this Liu Wei was the same person Chen Qi's mother had mentioned. Remembering Chen Qi's offer, he decided to ask her for help. He sent her a message asking for a private investigator. In response, she sent him 10,000 yuan, which confused him, but he realized he could use the money to buy information. He then called someone and asked if he was speaking to Hua Hua. On the other end, a girl responded, asking if he wanted to date her, but warned him that she wasn't cheap. Later, he went to the place where she had asked him to meet. As he waited, he pondered about the person who had sold him the information. Suddenly, someone placed a hand on his shoulder and greeted him with a casual, "Hey." It was a girl named Chen Hua, who looked surprisingly young for her age, 23 years old. She approached him and asked what information he was looking for. Chu was taken aback, finding it hard to believe she was the broker, as she appeared much younger. She confirmed that she was indeed the broker and then asked about his relationship with Ye Chenxi, joking that if Chenxi wasn't his girlfriend, she'd offer to take her place. Chu nearly spilled his juice at her boldness and explained that he was looking for information about the Tang family. Hua Hua's mood shifted as she became angry and asked if Tang Xian, the girl he had played basketball with, was his girlfriend. Chu was startled by her knowledge and wondered if she had already investigated him. He warned her not to underestimate him or he would find someone else to buy the information from. Hua Hua, however, found him to be very serious and intriguing. She then explained that the Tang family was one of the largest and most powerful families, with their primary company serving as their principal headquarters. She mentioned that most large business corporations were owned by the Tang family. However, the family had recently encountered financial difficulties, and their status had become unstable. To resolve their issues, the Li family proposed a marriage alliance, offering to help the Tang family in exchange for Tang Xian, the Tang family heiress, marrying Li Yue. Chu was shocked by this revelation and wondered if Xian had kept these secrets from him to avoid making him feel pressured. Hua Hua then asked if the information was sufficient. Chu, still curious, also wanted to know more about alchemy, an ancient martial arts family, though he wasn't sure if they still existed in this world. Hua Hua revealed that the Tang family was one of those ancient families specializing in elixirs and medicines. Intrigued, Chu asked her to tell him everything she knew. She agreed, but started teasing him by calling him a cute, yummy little brother. Irritated, Chu shouted at her to stop behaving that way. Hua Hua also explained to him that there are different types of alchemy. The first type is common and involves using extraordinary internal power to prepare elixirs, which is the Tang family's specialty. The second type, however, involves mysterious spiritual power, something completely beyond her knowledge. Chu was amazed to learn about spiritual power and asked her if there was anyone else like him in this world. She responded that she had already given him 2 valuable pieces of information, which would typically cost 100,000 yuan, but she'd give him a 20% discount because she liked him. Stepping closer to him as she said this, Chu then asked if she had any information about confidential transactions, such as those involving medicinal ingredients or anything related. Hua Hua agreed to share that information, but only if he would go to dinner with her. Chu agreed, and they headed out together to a nearby restaurant. The staff there seemed to know her well and asked what she wanted to order. Hua Hua confidently ordered 20 skewers and 4 cold beers. Chu was shocked to see that women in this world liked eating pork skewers, and he noticed many women around him also enjoying pork skewers and beer. It made him realize that this world was different from the one he originally knew. As the night went on, Hua Hua got drunk and started to lose control. She approached Chu, tears streaming down her face, as she talked about a boy she used to like who had rejected her because she was poor. Seeing that she had completely lost her composure, Chu decided to take her home. When they arrived at her place, he was surprised to find her room in complete disarray, realizing that she struggled to manage her own life and desperately needed someone to care for her. He gently placed her on the bed, but she suddenly grabbed him and pulled him onto the bed with her. She started crying and begged him to stay with her. Feeling confused but sympathetic, he agreed to stay. Her tears turned into a happy smile as she clung to him, utterly exhausted. She soon fell asleep on his chest. Although it felt strange to him, he gently laid her down on the bed and quietly began searching for information about the Tang family on his phone. Through his research, he discovered that the Tang family was widely known for their mastery of various alchemical techniques. However, due to recent infiltrations, their status was in jeopardy. As he dug deeper, he came across a confidential document and found a picture of the Shizhen auction house, the most important auction house in Jinmen. It was administered by an old martial arts family that possessed an incredible amount of elixirs. Chu realized that in any world, survival without money was impossible. But fortunately, he knew something that could be worth a lot in this world. A few days later, while practicing his powers on the terrace of his house, Chu thought about something known as spiritual rocks, which enhance the cultivation rhythm and aid in practicing ancient martial arts. Using his abilities, he began creating spiritual rocks by cultivating the so-called eternity, a process that absorbed the aura from the earth and sky. Since spiritual rocks didn't exist in this world, he planned to auction one off. Later, Chu visited Chenxi's house to help her mother. After completing the detoxification process, Aunt Ye Qingmei fully recovered, regaining all her strength. She expressed her deep gratitude and told him that if he ever needed help in the future, he only had to say the word. As he was leaving, he realized that by finishing the detoxification, his spiritual body had been partially released. His mission now was to cultivate as much as possible. The process was so noisy that his sister shouted at him, came to check on what he was doing. In a panic, Chu tried to hide the sword from her while simultaneously feeling nervous about being naked in front of her. Embarrassed, she quickly shut the door and left, sarcastically apologizing for interrupting his wanking session, and added that she wouldn't disturb him like that again. Once she was gone, Chu quickly put on his clothes, slipping the sword around his neck as a necklace. He decided to visit the auction house to sell the spiritual rock. When he arrived at the Shizhen auction house, it was late, and the guy at the door informed him that they were closed and to come back tomorrow. However, when Chu showed him the spiritual rock, his eyes widened in surprise at the sight of the golden yellow stone. He stood up and asked to see it more closely. As he examined it, he realized that it emanated a powerful aura, and the most amazing thing was its ability to greatly enhance cultivation. Recognizing it as a rare treasure, his attitude shifted immediately. He introduced himself as Zhai Yu, the successor of the Shizhen auction house, and they greeted each other formally. He then asked him about the name of the stone and how many he had. Chu told him it was a spiritual rock and assumed he already knew its effects. He mentioned that he had 5 of them. Zhai Yu offered him 2,000 yuan for each rock, meaning he would earn a total of 1 million yuan if he sold them all right away. As he left, Chu reflected on how the price was even higher than he had expected, realizing that the deal was well worth it. He began to consider the possibility of creating a huge business monopoly, and believed it was only a matter of time before he would dominate both the auction and martial arts worlds. On his way back, Chu received a message from Hua Hua inviting him for drinks that night. He smiled at the thought, but his moment of peace was abruptly interrupted when someone suddenly attacked him, trying to stab him. Instinctively, the sword around his neck activated, forming a powerful defensive barrier of light around him. The attacker was shocked by the power of the weapon, while Chu deftly countered with multiple slashes, injuring his assailant. Stepping closer, Chu demanded to know who had sent him. Terrified, the attacker confessed that Li Yue had hired him to kill Chu, underestimating him as just a weak student. Without hesitation, Chu finished him off, coldly remarking that Li Yue would have to retrieve his body later. Chu resolved to personally bring about Li Yue's downfall. But just as he made this decision, something strange began happening within his body. His body started boiling hot because he used it for the first time, and this stressed his current body. His vision